It is Wednesday morning. Guy here, live on YouTube and in your podcast feed, however you're getting it. Hit that like button if it's on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much. And if you're listening to the pod, great. I've been getting a few messages on Instagram from people going, can I send you an IG message to get in the mailbag? And I say, yeah, you can send me an IG DM to get in the mailbag. That's cool. Mailbag will be coming back. But a great way to also help the show out and get a question in is on Apple Podcast. If you leave a question in a review, you leave a 5-star review, you leave a question in a review, and that's also a way to get in the mailbag and help things out. All right, we are over 24 hours away from the draft, but not too far over 24 hours away from the draft. And with the schedule coming up, it's going to be 5 o'clock Thursday, of course, 10-minute rounds. And then Friday is rounds 2 and 3 at 4 Pacific. Those are 7-minute rounds. So if the Niners are going to do a trade on Friday, a Brandon Aiyuk trade on Friday for Washington's second round pick at 36 and their second round pick at 40, let's just say, which is more than valuable as it relates to if you're just fundamentally emotion out of it, looking at the trade, 36 and 40 would be pretty good value. I mean, just on what trades are worth, that would be good value. So keep that in mind. But for the most part, I think we got to look at the first round. And Daniel Jeremiah posted this morning, 7:27 a.m. He said, looking at possible teams for an Aiyuk trade, and I keep coming back to the same two, the Colts and the Jags. Now, some of you who want to bury your head in the sand, maybe, are going to look at that and go, what does he know? This tweet from DJ, who I know we've had on the show, I've gotten to know him a little bit over the years through John. Awesome dude. Very connected. I don't think it needs to be said, but let's just say it for the people. It's funny on the internet. People be like, Dale Jeremiah, what does he know? But then some random bullshit report they'll believe. Claim. So this post from DJ at 7:27 a.m. about, boy, the Colts and the Jags, those are the two teams I keep coming back to with an Aiyuk trade, came 3 minutes after a post in which he said, to summarize my last 5 calls, everyone is moving up for an offensive tackle. So he just got off 5 phone calls, tweets about offensive tackles, and then 3 minutes later just decides to tweet about the Colts and the Jags. I think we can look at this and understand that there is a conversation going on around the NFL. And when Daniel Jeremiah talks to teams, I said this yesterday, I'll say it again and I'll say it tomorrow. One of the biggest stories of the first round is whether or not Brandon Aiyuk gets traded. That is one of the big, not a Niners story, just one of the biggest stories of the draft on Thursday night is, will Brandon Aiyuk get traded? For a variety of reasons. They are a massive brand. He is a star player. And any trade matters, but anything the Niners do, everybody knows gets attention and takes it up a notch. So, the first pick of the draft is not drama. The rest of the picks are, which quarterback goes second? I think it'll be Drake May, but what happens with Jaden Daniels? What happens with Bo Nix? What happens with J.J. McCarthy? What happens with Michael Penix? What happens is everyone trying to get up and get Joe Alt? There's going to be movement. There's going to be trades. That's what DJ's saying. There's going to be trades for an offensive tackle. People are going to be moving. All right, so are the Niners finding out we're not getting anything close to what we want at 31? The Colts, by the way, let's also set this up. The Colts have the 15th pick. The Colts have the 15th pick in the draft, and the Jags have the 17th pick. Okay, so we that we know, but if we're talking about first rounders, which when we look at the history of receiver trades, a 15th pick or a 17th pick just fundamentally is great value. Okay, it is. If the Niners do a deal for the 15th pick for Brandon Aiyuk, just the draft value of the world will say that's a really good deal for the Niners. All right. Now you can stop and say, okay, but we're not doing this in a vacuum. We're not doing this on a chart. we're doing this with a team that's trying to win a Super Bowl with their most prolific receiver, right? He's their best receiver. He gets the most targets. He's their best receiver. He's the youngest of their group. He's the most likely to be your young quarterback's future target for another 7 to 10 years, right? Like all of these things have to factor in. You're maybe trading a guy away for a downgrade at least in the immediate in a year that you're trying to win the Super Bowl. So, I understand why, and Michael Silver wrote that yesterday that people think, they're not getting a first rounder for him, that eventually they'll have to get a second rounder for him. Why? Even if the value is there, can you really justify that deal when you're trying to win a championship? If you do it for a second rounder, are you really helping your team this year? And how far are you willing to go to help your team? A couple other things to mention. Well, many other things to mention. One other thing, just in the overarching kind of discussion here, is they can afford this guy. They can afford this guy and Debo. They can afford this guy and Purdy. They can do it. But one thing I've had in the back of my mind for a couple of days is it possible that Kyle Shanahan does not view Debo Samuel as about to be done? Is it possible that he views Debo as, you know what? This is going to be a key core piece of this thing. For the next 4 years. He's not looking at it like, let's transition Debo to Aiyuk in a year. He's looking at it like, let's keep him around for several years, maybe. But I do think they want him back. And I do think they're willing to pay him top of the market receiver money. And so the question is, like, is he willing to budge off at whatever, 27, whatever he wants, or not? There was a report, somebody said yesterday, I think like an actual report, somewhere in the 25 range. It might have been Rap Sheet that said somewhere in the 25 million range. That's perfectly reasonable. That is right up the alley of what you expect when you have a top of the line quarterback. So, wide receiver. So I money's the issue, but I think it's really about, like, do the Niners end up in a spot where they really feel like they can get a immediate impact and a future star? And, the Colts and the Jags, it's interesting that Daniel uses those two teams because they are both right in that range, right? They are at 15 and they are at 17, and that's about where. I also think the Colts are interesting because we know that the Colts and the Niners have some similar they've got similar traits they like in guys. Like, they both like DeForest Buckner. No accident, right? The Niners have the gold helmet. The Colts have the gold star. It's like McDowell's and McDonald's. Okay. They're like McDowell's and McDonald's. The Niners are McDonald's. Respectfully, the Colts are McDowell's, but they like the same stuff. So you think back to the Aiyuk draft, the 2020 draft. The Colts probably really liked Aiyuk. The Colts drafted, they were in the market for a receiver. They drafted a high floor receiver high in the second round, right? They drafted Michael Pittman with the second pick of the second round. T. Higgins went right before him, and the Colts took Michael Pittman. So the Colts were probably looking at, in that draft, they were probably looking at the Buckner deal going, all right, we could get Aiyuk, or we get Buckner, and then we get a receiver in the second round that we really like. So my guess is that, just like the Niners liked Sam Darnold for a long time, my guess is that the Colts have liked Brandon Aiyuk for a long time. Now, would they trade the 15th pick for him? God, that's rich. I mean, why don't you just draft a receiver there if you're Indy? Just if you want another receiver, draft another guy you like there. Maybe they don't have a gold star guy, receiver, that they like there. Maybe they look at Brian Thomas. Somebody told me something today that was interesting about Brian Thomas, the LSU receiver, viewed pretty universally as the fourth receiver in this draft. The top three guys are all going to be gone in the top 12. And there is a word out there that, like, around LSU, and I'm sure the teams know this, that there are some people around the program that think that Brian Thomas can actually be the better receiver than Malik Neighbors. But, Malik Neighbors has a work ethic, like, works his ass off, which is kind of critical. So if you told me, like, does that sound like a Niner guy? Well, on the surface, no. But what do we know about Kyle Shanahan? he really trusts his ability to develop receivers. People around the Niners and people around Shanahan, they talk about him like he's a receiver coach, right? Like he's a receiver. I think we always look at him like a play caller and a quarterback coach, but I think he views himself to a degree as a receiver. He was a receiver. That's his position. So you look at what happened with Aiyuk, and I think he probably views it like, we drafted this guy, had a lot of traits, the whole doghouse thing. He doesn't look at it like a doghouse, but he does look at it like we developed him. And if we could get, say, Brian Thomas, who maybe is a top 10 talent and has only started to develop, and we could teach him how to run better routes, how to work harder, how to focus. Maybe we could have a superstar there, right? So maybe they view it that way. Now, it doesn't feel like that guy's going to be available at 17. And it doesn't really feel like he'll be available around 15, 14, 15, 16 probably is where it's at. Now, you'd have to ask yourself, why would a team, if a player is potentially that good, why would somebody trade away the opportunity to draft him in order to pay a guy? And I think that's where you have to go back to situations, desperation situations. And Jacksonville, it's interesting that DJ mentions Jacksonville, because when you go through the first round and you say, who is desperate enough to kind of overpay for a ready-made receiver right now, right? Like it's not any different than DoorDash. You can make a sandwich, but it's going to take you time. It's going to take you time investment. Maybe you'd rather invest your money than your time. So you DoorDash a sandwich so you can keep doing whatever it is you're doing, even though you got bread and turkey and mayo in the fridge. You don't want to invest your time. You want to invest your money. Some people invest their time. Some people invest their money, right? So maybe Jacksonville would rather invest its money than its time in a receiver, because maybe they don't have time. Maybe Trent Baalke doesn't have time. Maybe Doug Peterson doesn't have time. Organizationally, they have to make some decisions on Trevor Lawrence. They don't have any more time to figure out if he's a franchise quarterback. If he'd had an MVP level season last year, great. They'd be handing him a $50 million per year extension in a matter of weeks. But he didn't have that kind of year last year. And they're not sure. And Doug Peterson said at the league meetings, well, we still need him to step up more in big moments. Oh, so Jacksonville doesn't have time. But they have money. And they got the 17th pick. Indy. Why would Indy do this? They're usually a patient team. But he's a gold star guy. And the thing that Aiyuk has is time. If you pay Brandon Aiyuk, you are paying for his best time. And what is his best time? It's his prime, baby. His prime. I'm going to see Coach Prime this weekend. I'm going to call this Colorado spring game. First thing Friday morning. I will be doing draft content from the road on Friday. But he's got time. So they're willing to pay for his time in his prime, potentially. 13, Vegas. Do they have time? They have money. Feels a little too rich there. They could just get a quarterback there, right? They could get Michael Penix at 13. Maybe they can move up and get Antonio Pierce's guy. The guy that Antonio Pierce won and then had vacated many wins with Jaden Daniels. They could go do that. Who else is desperate? Who doesn't have time? The Jets at 10 don't have time. But the Jets need a tackle. They could get Brock Bowers. They were on the short list of teams initially that when we went through and went, who is desperate? Maybe they're desperate. But I think it's very interesting that Daniel Jeremiah just said Colts and Jags. Daniel is working the phones this morning. He's talking to a lot of people. He's getting a lot of intel. So that is real information. And we've had now back-to-back days. I mean, really, like last night and then today, we had Mike Silver talking about the price. We had DJ talking about the price. I did see something interesting this morning on Niners Reddit. I like to check what's going on in the streets in the morning. This is from MM825. Thanks for your contribution to the show on Niners Reddit. He said Niners extensions historically. Debo July 31, Kittle August 13, Fred Warner July 21, Nick Bosa September 6. So his premise or his conclusion is the whole idea that a contract extension has to happen before the draft, or that some level of agreement has to happen before the draft is manufactured by the agent. That's not how this team does business. From an extension standpoint, that's true, but the draft is not an artificial deadline. Draft not an artificial deadline, right? Like the draft is a real deadline in the sense that you do lose one option when the draft passes. Now, I don't think the Niners, like what's interesting about this to me is he's playing this year on his fifth-year option. One way or the other, whether he gets a contract extension or not, he's not sitting out games. Everyone's always like, well, what if he doesn't show up? What if he sits out games? Show me the list of guys that sit out games, like really sit out games. It's not happening, especially when you get $14 million coming to you this year. You're getting paid one way or the other. So, I think the longer he waits, and it's kind of clear, part of this is he wants to wait, right? What also pushes this stuff back? Other receiver contracts. And he wants to wait. He wants to wait to see the deals that other people are getting. As we're doing this live show, Ian Rappaport reports. Let me get this up here for you on the video stream. By the way, I can see that a lot of you are watching on X. That's cool. Thank you. The idea event would be to get you over to YouTube where, the cheddar is made and, it actually connects to other things. Like the X views don't go anywhere. They don't lead to anything. The YouTube views actually lead to something. So if you're watching on X, go to YouTube. I'm glad you're here, but thank you. Go to YouTube. All right, let's get this rap sheet report. Sources. He says, I love when they say sources and then just tag the agents. So I think we can pretty much guess that this is legitimate information. Sources. The Lions have a deal for one of the top young talents, agreeing to an extension for Amon-Ra St. Brown. He gets 4 years and more than $120 million with $77 million guaranteed. Oh, fundamentally, that's a $30 million average annual value. So it could be that the Niners look at it and go, boy, that is rich, right? That is way more than we want to pay. $77 million guaranteed. If that's the total guarantee, if that's truly the true total guarantee, that's more than Cooper Kupp, $75 million, and more than Tyreek, $72 million. The cap jumped a lot. That guy's good. Aiyuk's good. Give me Aiyuk, but that guy, like if you're the Lions and you said, well, the Niners are offering you Aiyuk for Amon-Ra St. Brown, I would understand if the Lions said, no, we don't want to do that deal. I'd get that. Let's interrupt this conversation for this question on the stream from Evan Wise. Evan is the first to ask this question today. This has not been mentioned yet. Evan says, you might have already said, but where can I cop one of these Purdy hats? Evan, I'm glad you bring it up. You are watching the leak. These hats have just leaked right here on this stream. If you're listening, you can't see it, so go to YouTube and watch. If you're watching on X, great, but you can see it. If you're listening, though, don't go to X because that stream, I delete that stream because that stream just dies eventually on X. I don't like leaving it up there. On YouTube, it lives. So go to YouTube. And I wondered, as I wear these hats, didn't say anything about them, would people immediately recognize that they're Brock Purdy hats? They are. These are, what I'm wearing is a hat with the saloon font that says the number 262 on it. Brock Purdy's draft position. Not many guys get drafted last, and even fewer guys get drafted 262nd. You go back and look at the last 20 years, most drafts don't even get to 262 picks. I haven't looked yet how many of these are going to get to. So these are coming. I hope to have these up for sale by today, but that's not going to happen. I think we might make a tweak or two to it, might take some pre-orders, but keep it here. I'll have some more information for you tomorrow. I'm talking to Steve at National Sports Apparel, who is helping me make these. And right now I've got this black, which I like, and I got the white, which I like. So we'll see. I mean, but these are the hats I've been teasing for a while. Eventually, we will also do the Hey Guy hat. Charlie on the stream says, I'm on our contract extension. Yeah, well, these are all extensions, right? So the contract averages out to $24 million a year. It's not really 30 a year. You know, remember, when you get extended, this is the same with the Devontae Smith deal that he just did, right? Devontae Smith, that contract doesn't start for a couple more years. So that's the same with all these deals. These extensions, you are buying later years. So just keep that in mind. We need Dan Dick out. Hey, guy, I don't know why Dan doesn't wear. I've never seen Dan in a hat. Robert asked, would you ever do red color? Yes, but I would, but it's tough finding the right red. I've got some reds here. They're not just right. So I would love to do a red. Antoine says, every time I come back, expect your voice to be healed. It never is. Must be long recovery. I mean, healed means 100%. And so from that standpoint, it's not healed. Correct. It is getting better every couple of days, I would say, is where I notice. I do my exercises for voice placement. And every time I do that, I don't know if you can tell, it's just slightly better for a couple minutes. So I do it longer, it's better longer. So we're improving. But yeah, I mean, I expected recovery to be less than a week. We're in week 5. Brock Purdy has UCL surgery in the offseason, comes back as an MVP finalist. Guy has vocal cord surgery this offseason. MVP season loading. Maybe. We'll see. But I've had a few people say, hey, man, don't come back till your voice is healed. I can't injure it. Thank you for your concern, internet doctors. But we're good. We're making progress. And we're fine. Okay. To go back to DJ's post, Colts and Jags. I think we have to look at this like Brandon Aiyuk might go to bed tonight as a Niner for the last time. That's very possible. And it's really dependent on what players are available when a team that's willing to trade for Brandon Aiyuk is drafting. The Niners, you would think, since they've acknowledged they are taking calls. So what they've done to prepare for this is put a list together of the players they're willing to trade Brandon Aiyuk for, the rookies that they're willing to trade Brandon Aiyuk for. And if those players are available to them, then they'll probably make one last call to Brandon and go, Brandon, this is what our contract offer is going to be. Your agent probably already knows, because we maybe let them back channel a little bit, what the Jags are willing to pay you if you want to go to Jacksonville. You probably already knows that they'll give you $26 million a year, $27 million a year. We're offering you, our offer, we'll get to this. This is what we'll be comfortable with. This is your last chance. Otherwise, we're trading you to the Jags because they got a guy, and we need to know now because they just called us and we got 6 minutes left. And go, all right, hold on, let me call you back. And then they got to think about it. What are we willing to do? And so the question is, the biggest question today and tomorrow, as we're watching this draft unfold on Thursday night, is who are the players the Niners would do it for? And do they get drafted? Are the Jags really willing to trade? Now, people are like, well, you're not going to trade him for 17. Well, you could. I mean, that the Jags wouldn't do it, that it's too rich. You could trade him for 17. You could trade him for 17 and, him plus a second, him plus a third, or him plus a fourth. You could do that deal. Like, remember the Tyreek Hill deal, a pick went with Tyreek to Miami. So when people say like a 17, no one's trading a first. Well, you could attach a pick to Aiyuk to get to 17. And you could use 17 again. You could move up. Like, it's possible you do 17 and then you get to 12. Right. But just keep that in mind when people are like, your Silver's article, right? No one's trading a first. Well, you could if you attach a pick to him. So who do they like? Would they do it for Brian Thomas, the receiver out of LSU? Do they think that level of talent? We got Debo, we got Kittle, we got McCaffrey who had 83 catches. We got Jennings could easily take on a larger workload. We could easily throw the ball to Jennings more. And then we bring in, a rookie receiver. We give him some targets. By next year, we're throwing him the ball. He's got 70 catches, right? You could. And then his prime is really lined up with Purdy. Maybe he takes the top off a little more, that sort of thing. The other guy, another guy that I think really stands out, who I don't think will be there at 17 and probably won't be there at 15, is Fuanga from Oregon State. I'm pretty confident in Fuanga as the pronunciation. I'm not as confident on the first name pronunciation. Usually I like to, nail down pronunciations, but I don't have that one nailed down. But I didn't have the beef this year, so I didn't study that one. But that would be another guy, Fuanga. Like, I think they like him. I think they've been checking in on him. Dan CMC says, no way am I using Aiyuk and a pick to get 17. That's bad value for the Niners. Well, draft history would tell us that 17 for Aiyuk is not – the Niners win that trade just based on value. So just keep that in mind. Lost Supremacist comment. I don't think any team would give a top 20 pick. I don't think the Niners will trade anything outside of I don't think anyone will give a top 20 for Aiyuk. I don't think the Niners would trade him for anything outside of the top 20. Keep BA and keep working on a contract. I agree with that. Fundamentally, I do agree with that. But that's where you start getting into what's going on here. Something is happening here, right? Mike Silver knows his shit. Daniel Jeremiah knows his shit. They're talking about trades. DJ's getting off the phone with a bunch of people talking about tackles. And he immediately, 3 minutes after that, says, oh, by the way, I keep coming back to the same two teams, the Colts and the Jags. So the Niners, the Niners are going to answer the phone tomorrow. And somebody is going to call them. Maybe it's Friday that somebody calls. All right, guys, the first round passed. You didn't trade Aiyuk. You're still no closer on an extension. So what do you think? Chargers, will you take 37? Like, someone's going to call Friday and they'll have to decide where we're at. So something's happening. People, all these teams, they're talking about it. They're trying to figure it out. And they're interested because he's a good player. Like, they should be interested, right? It's funny. Like, everyone's like, we love him, but he's not worth a first. it's this weird kind of back and forth. Here's a comment. Jan says, only a team in their Super Bowl window in dire need of a receiver would trade a first for BA. Otherwise, you go with a rookie for 5 cheap years. I don't think that's true if you go back to what I said about like Jacksonville, right? Not everybody is trying to win the Super Bowl this year. I mean, they are, but you're also just like trying to do enough to keep a job or get an extension. Mike says 2 issues here. If the Niners let him go, then the 5th-year option loses, 5th-year extension loses its meaning. Is there a team that wants to pay $25 million and give up a first or a high second-round pick? Yeah, I mean, if you're acquiring him, you're saying we want to pay him. So, I mean, we'll find out if that team exists, but that team also has to be willing to pay more than the Niners are willing to pay. Thank you for props on my voice. It's I'm a hero, some are saying. Leon says Adam Peters calls. He offers 36, 40, next year's 3rd, and next year's 5th. Yes or no? Well, that's value. That is value for Brandon. That is an excellent deal for Brandon Aiyuk for the Niners. So they would have to consider that. It's hard to say yes or no because it's partly dependent on the players that are available. The Niners have 22 players with a first-round grade on them this year. Now, maybe one of those guys is available at 36. But they would consider that. And part of me thinks they might do it. But they're in a tough spot because they're trying to win a championship this year. So, I would say, put it this way. I want to say no to that trade, but I think most times you put that trade in front of somebody, they're doing that deal because of the value. Comment from Herbie Holland. It says, there is no GM stupid enough to trade for Aiyuk when there are plenty of receivers in this draft or next draft. If they do, they should be fired. Strawberry says, everyone keeps talking about how the Niners' weapons are overrated, yet Brock is overrated because of the weapons. It doesn't make any sense. This is a great point. The first person that articulated this point to me was Ethan Strauss a few weeks ago. He's like, wait a second, we've got a problem here. It doesn't quite add up. Purdy ain't shit because he's all his talent around him. But nobody wants the talent around him. Nobody wants to trade for Debo. Nobody wants to trade for Aiyuk. So what's the deal? The offensive line stinks, yet they can't replace any of these guys. I thought that was a very good point. And again, this is a very good point. Gigala says, could you package 17 and 31 to move into the top 10? Yeah, I mean, you could. You definitely could. Let's see, where do I think that would get you? Let's actually talk about this. So 10, 13, in theory, it could get you, in theory, I think that gets you around 8. Maybe to 7, but probably not. Because I think 7, here's the thing. Just on paper, that gets you to 7 or 8. But if everyone's trying to trade up for tackles and Joe Alt, who is the clear number 1 tackle in this draft, if he's going to go around 6 or 7, then you may have an inflated costs this year. So maybe it doesn't get you to, it doesn't get you to 8. Maybe it gets you to 9, something like that. But yes, the short answer to that is yes. And now you're talking about going up and getting one of the top receivers. Now you're talking about going to get Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors or, I think it's possible. A lot of people are doing I like Malik Neighbors more than Marvin Harrison Jr. thing, and that the league, I saw Chris Sims said that today. Todd McShay said that today, that people around the league, there are a lot of people around the league that like LSU's receiver Malik Neighbors more than they like Ohio State's receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. And then it feels like Rome Odunze is viewed as kind of like a high floor guy. But I get chills thinking about if you could go 17-31 and get one of the top 3 receivers, now you are helping your team this year and you are helping your team into the future. And I think that becomes really attractive, right? It's basically what you're saying is, would you trade Aiyuk in 31 for Odunze, Harrison, or Neighbors? And to me, the answer is yeah, I would do that. Easier said than done, because you have to get somebody to agree to trade you 15 or 17 first. But the other thing I wanted to say is it's possible, just based on what I've heard, that Kyle Shanahan goes, let's just say Neighbors is better than Brian Thomas, but we'd have to trade 2 picks for Malik Neighbors. We only need to do one thing to get Brian Thomas. And maybe Brian Thomas is almost as good or could be better. I do think it's possible. What I'm trying to say in too many words, I think it's possible that there are people that think that eventually maybe Brian Thomas could be, with the right development, one of the top 3 receivers in this draft, or maybe even better than Malik Neighbors. When's your voice going to be normal again? I don't know. But we're getting closer, so I'm optimistic. The recovery's taken longer than it should. Than it normally does. There were some complications in the surgery, so I'm very thankful to the surgeon for salvaging the procedure. We've gone in there with a scope. Everything looks good. So now it's just about time. I think the complication that we had extended the recovery, but it does not, from what it appears, it does not prevent me from getting my voice back 100% soon. So Dr. Wong, I'm very thankful to him, because from what I've been told post-surgery, not many surgeons could have pulled off what he pulled off. Anna, my vocalist, I'm very thankful to her. She's given me great instruction and feedback. I'm doing exercises that is helping with the healing. And so we're getting better. So it's like one of these things. It makes the content worse. I'm a stickler for, the voice. That's why I did the procedure, because my voice was a little off. And hopefully in the long run, it'll be a blessing, and I'll be happy that I did it. I think that'll be the case. But I also don't want to spend all this time talking about it, not because I mind it. I don't mind it, but it's not what you click on these videos for, listen to this podcast for, to hear me just going on about my voice. But it is shittier. It makes the content worse. So if you watch despite it, or if you took a break, people think I'll be offended if you're like, I stopped listening for a while. I will not be offended. I do not. That's fine. I get it. So thanks if you're still listening. And if you're not, well, then you didn't hear this message at all. But using it doesn't hurt it. I can talk. It's fine. Somebody asked, am I going to Boulder this week? Yes. I've got a 5 a.m. flight to Boulder right now, Friday morning. Lee says, how many seasons did it take for Aiyuk to be trusted by Kyle? 3 to 4. This team doesn't have that kind of time. I think really it took 2. But it does, he developed into who he is today. And I still think he's got better football ahead of him. Like, whether he's on I think even if he remains on the Niners, the run first Niners, I think Aiyuk is like, if he's here this year, he's going to set a career high for receptions. And then if he's here the next year, he'll set another career high for receptions. I think we are coming into like 3 years. Within the next 3 years, he's going to have 2 career highs. That's coming up. I got a meeting with Steve. Steve, I got a meeting with you. Real quick, Cynthia asked, love the hat. Where did you get it from? We're making the hats. I haven't sold them yet. I will tell you where you can buy them when they're ready to be bought. But I got to go. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. We'll talk soon. Bye, everybody.